Tom, markets are really watching oil and yields, frankly, as key drivers this morning, it seems. But which one matters perhaps a bit more for the overall market right now, in your opinion?
I think they're both negatively impacting the equity market right now because they're tied together, right? You've got yields rising. We got the 10-year, the benchmark, up to levels we haven't seen since January 2025. The 30-year, which is above 5.3%, it's the highest level since 2007. And this coincides with the fact that global yields continue to rise at this point. So that's creating headwinds for the equity markets. Now, why are yields rising? Well, inflationary pressures, borrowing costs starting to rise, crude oil back above $84 a barrel. So that's negatively impacting the Treasury market, which is in turn moving yields to the upside. So that's creating these headwinds for the equity market. Now, let's put it into context, right? The S&P 500 is still only about 1% off of its record highs that we hit last Thursday. So take it with a grain of salt at this point. But the trajectory and the velocity of the movements and yields to the upside is what's concerning, I think, for equity markets here moving forward. Because if we start seeing more additional volatility in the yield market, that's going to negatively impact what's going on in the equity market. Now, what's losing steam today is chip makers, right? You've got NVIDIA down lower. You got the memory chip makers, some of the semi-equipment makers that are all down. Well, they were all higher yesterday, right? And leading the market, even though we finished slightly negative yesterday. And now on the flip side, you've got software that's a little bit higher today, and that was weaker yesterday. So it just seems like we've got some bifurcation in the market where investors are rotating from winners and losers on a daily basis. I don't know if that's sustainable by any stretch of the imagination, but if you look at, the geopolitical tensions that continue to heat up, you mentioned that talks between the U.S. and Iran are stalling. They're not stalling, they're non-existent at this point, and that's what the market's kind of grasping a hold of right now. Even though earnings have been really solid and supported these moves recently for equities to get to at or near all-time highs, now you're starting to see these geopolitical tensions start coming back into play, and with a little economic data and little as far as earnings coming out, the market's going to focus more on these geopolitical tensions. And until we start to see a reignition of talks between the two countries, we could see this continued volatility in the markets, Jenny. I think that's what people have to be concerned about. But as I've been kind of pounding the table over the last month, watch the velocity and the move in yields. It's going to create headwinds for.
I mean, you have warned that we're seeing this underestimation really of inflation risks. So say beyond just energy prices, what signals are you now watching, Jade, that really could show that overall we're seeing the Fed still concerned about inflation, or perhaps not as concerned about inflation?
Yeah, we're kind of confused as to where the Fed is. I mean, if inflation is his number one target, we're talking about Mr. Warsh, of course. We'll find out more, hopefully, next week at Jackson Hole. But what are we watching right now? Well, first of all, yesterday was one of the slowest days down here all year. So we're in that summer slowdown, not a lot of earnings. We have the retail earnings coming out. But we are just watching oil. That spike yesterday caught traders a little off guard. Didn't really have an impact on the market, but when we talk inflation, the number one inflationary point that is going to affect the consumer is that price of oil. So we have that, and then we have a 10-year that continues to go above 4.7%. That slow rise has not impacted equities, but if it was to take a faster path towards 5%, it could cause some shocks here. And then, me as a technician, the seasonal factors, August, September, the two worst months. A lot of traders are kind of skittish that we are going to have that seasonal downturn as we head into the midterm elections.
Okay, I mean, a constant theme has been the market's resiliency this year. And so what would the catalyst be for the S&P 500 if we overall just say want a correction or are forecasting a correction? What would you see as perhaps a major risk to right now the bullish momentum?
Well, I think the biggest risk to the bullish momentum is something that we don't expect NVIDIA to say when earnings are reported next week. I think that's where all eyes will be focused, because the story has been earnings. Earnings continue to grow, and we saw two earnings that really stuck out to me. We had Amazon and we had Meta. wasn't the earnings. They both beat. Revenue's good. The spend continues, but it was that explanation of the spend. Amazon went through things point by point and gave a great guide. Meta did not. So NVIDIA has been, it's going to beat. It's going to raise. The guide should be tremendous. But what is that spend? What kind of momentum can it continue with? Because right now, it's got momentum. It is back above key moving averages. It's got its eyes set on that 240 level, which is around the all-time high. So I think NVIDIA is going to be the one telltale sign. And you don't want to single out one stock, but we can when it comes to the importance of this one. So let's see what Jensen says next week. Otherwise, continue to see some rotation under the surface. The market has been doing extremely well, but it seems like it's a little tired, and you add in those seasonal factors and some concerns that this continues in the straight, and we may stumble a little bit here.
About AI, infrastructure, the idea of it being an asset class and the like, and this particular deal has been in the headlines now for a whole bunch of weeks, if not longer than that. For those who don't know, what SB Energy is. This is part of SoftBank. Explain what you do even before we get into it.
Yeah, no, appreciate the question. So we're a power-first, community-focused infrastructure company. We're backed by SoftBank, OpenAI, now NVIDIA. We build big projects, big infrastructure like this. We first start with power. We want to focus on power, partner with utilities, partner with communities, make sure rates don't go up, protect ratepayers, protect resources like water, and then invest in communities. So we want our campuses to be, a cornerstone of the community. We're going to be there for decades, and that's what we do.
So explain the economics of, for example, this plant that's this data center, and what it's going to cost to build, how you think about the chips in it. We keep talking about the chips are collateralizing part of this. What the depreciation schedule is for these things. I mean, I think that's a sort of a big part of what you think of the longer-term implications of this ecosystem.
Yeah, so our role in the project is really the developer. So we're securing the land, we're doing the power solution, and we're going to build the shells, the turnkey data centers. We're not working to bring in the compute hardware, the chip and system. That'll be OpenAI. In this case, NVIDIA has secured exclusivity on the site, so it'll be the full NVIDIA suite of products. But our role is, if you think about maybe a $500 billion project, our role is 30 to 40% of that, and then the compute hardware comes in after. So if you take the news yesterday, NVIDIA is working with us on our piece of it. So that's the scope of the announcement. They're securing the exclusivity for the rest of their hardware, but this isn't them financing the chips.
Do you think, though, of the idea of NVIDIA financing even part of your piece of it as a net? I mean, could you find financing? I guess the better question is, could you find financing elsewhere?
So we ran a competitive process for the site. It's a really unique site. It's one of the most unique sites in the world to be at this scale, to have this amount of community support, to have a power solution that is firm. So we ran a competitive process, had lots of interest, and the winning bid was a bid between OpenAI and NVIDIA. It was a joint bid. OpenAI is paying the lease, though. So our lease is a 20-year lease with OpenAI. They're paying their own way. They're our customer. And we're really excited to support them with something like this. What we've seen increasingly is compute is really the critical constraint in the industry. Companies like OpenAI, more compute allows them to have more intelligence, which yields more products, which yields more revenue. And that's what we're doing.
Do you have any concern about their ability to pay over the next 20 years?
So if you look at the frontier models like AI, like Anthropic, we're seeing tremendous revenue growth, tremendous customer adoption. And again, compute is really that scarce resource, and that's what we do as a company. So if you think about that compute to intelligence to products to revenue, our piece is the front.
I'm asking you, somebody had to sit around and go, we think OpenAI is going to be a good credit for the next 20 years, right? You're also saying that they came in with the best bid.
They did.
And one of the things that I was curious about is, in terms of backing, was there anybody in the financial space that was bidding for this, or we're just talking about hyperscalers, or who are the people bidding for the space?
Yeah, so we went out to the leading hyperscalers, cloud providers, AI frontier labs, And there was a lot of interest in the product. The reason that we have NVIDIA...
A lot of bids?
A lot of bids, correct. It was a very competitive process. I think that's emblematic of the demand we're seeing for compute. It's not just OpenAI, it's not just Anthropic. I mean, you look at the growth on cloud as well. There's a lot of need for more compute in the space. And again, that's what we do.
But clearly, one of the things you're suggesting is OpenAI and NVIDIA were the most aggressive in terms of their bid.
They were the most competitive. Correct.
Right, so Amazon and Google and Microsoft were not as competitive.
So we had strong bids. You always have to have a winner, right? And in this case, it was OpenAI and NVIDIA. And again, the reason NVIDIA is on our part of the equation here is that helps us to unlock things like investment grade financing. It helps to ensure the project is success, right? And this is a real project. It's a real infrastructure project. We've got real contracts. We're building the project, and that's what really distinguishes it.
I know you're saying that you're not responsible for the chips and what goes inside it. But at some level, you are responsible, or OpenAI is going to be responsible for paying you for this space, and therefore they have to be depreciating these chips in a particular way, as does NVIDIA. Can you just explain? I mean, the reason I keep getting back to the depreciation schedule issue, I know you're saying it's not your schedule to matter, but it kind of is, because it matters to whether everybody can pay for all this longer term. And multiple hyperscalers have multiple depreciation schedules. They're public about that. And so what is yours?
Yeah, so ours, I mean, it's a 20-year lease. If you look at a data center, the data center life can be 20, 30, 40 years. That's how we look at our infrastructure. We're kind of the bedrock that underpins this economy.
I understand that, but you have to. I assume you have a view about the chips.
Yeah, exactly.
What's your view about the chips?
I mean, I think it's, as you said, each tenant will have its own view on the depreciation.
You wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal.
Yes.
13 years ago.
13 years ago, yes.
And now all we're talking about is how to finance these data centers. But you had an idea that I think you still think is applicable today and is sort of being taken on in certain ways.
I mean, it's certainly so much has happened, and particularly recently, to make it even a more powerful idea. As you mentioned, with all this financing, something like $1 trillion this year of CapEx, and then also with agents, AI agents becoming prevalent, and that's also going to be growing by tremendous amounts. The currency that you mentioned, which hasn't been created by anyone yet, I hope somebody does, could be a way to help finance part of that expansion, because you think about airline miles. When you buy an airline ticket, you get miles. You can convert them for a ticket at some point. The cloud providers could sell this type of currency backed by an hour of compute, and people could hold it, or businesses could hold it and convert it. So by selling that currency, you're now able to use that money to fund infrastructure, part of this CapEx.
Isn't this a little bit like what's happening with the ideas of tokens? I mean, so right now you could argue that the AI model companies are selling tokens, right? You're burning tokens and you pay. And so the question is, if you could just turn those tokens into an actual currency, and then I assume lever the tokens.
Well, you could think about it as tokenizing compute for sure. But the idea is that hopefully it becomes more prevalent, and it's not just if the companies manage this correctly, it becomes something that consumers want to hold as well. Just the way that consumers don't necessarily convert their airline miles instantly as soon as they earn them, they save them up.
So you're saying at the beginning of the month I would buy a certain amount of tokens, and then I could burn them or not.
You could hold them, and as long as they hold value,
right?
And it's up to the provider, Amazon, Google, whoever, to make sure that they hold on to their value in real terms, not just in nominal terms. Then there's no incentive necessarily to spend them.
So why do you like this model better than, for example, and we've been talking about it all week because Becky had that great interview with Jensen and the gang of six, if you will, financial firms that are planning to try to turn the chips into an asset class with the idea that the chips can be collateralized.
Right, but this is still, it's an interesting idea, but it's still dollar debt at the end of the day. Once the cloud providers, if they can sell these tokens, if you will, this cloud currency, that's a liability on their balance sheet, but it's a liability that's not based in dollars. It's a liability that's based in compute, and that's the fundamental difference. So with this, the NVIDIA, the Ganga 6 new type of debt, they still have to pay dollars for that debt. If there's a glut and you don't get the amount of compute expenses, they're still going to have to pay off that debt.
But what's the difference if you turn it into this currency?
Because if you turn it into this currency, the liability is compute. You don't owe the holders of this currency dollars. You owe them compute time. You owe them a certain amount of hours on their.
So it's a debt that can be devalued and basically written off or gotten rid of?
It's a debt that will be extinguished when somebody exercises it and uses it on the cloud, on one of these providers' cloud.
But it's an interesting suggestion, because one of the things that has been devalued over the years is airline points.
That's right.
So that's become a currency of sorts.
I don't know if I want to be a holder of.
Well, that's the thing. Airline miles have been devalued. They haven't been, in my view, handled properly by the airlines. But yet, there's still the global value of airline miles is worth something like $240 billion. The big three airlines in the U.S., it's something like $84 billion. The enterprise values of those companies is about $160 billion. The cloud companies are much, much larger. They could create something much bigger.
I understand why the cloud companies would want that, a different currency. I'm not sure if I'd want to be a holder of any of them.
So if they would have to prove to you that they're not going to do the devaluations that airline companies have done.
Yeah, but you can prove it to me by just keeping it in dollars.
Well, if you keep it in dollars, you get hit by inflation, and if you have the money in the bank, you're not getting interest or market rates of interest. If that hour, that certificate, however you want to call it, if that holds value in real terms, goes up in value, and that's up to the cloud companies, but they're incentivized to do that because it's another consumer product that they have, and they have incentives to have you trust them and to be trusted, and that makes for a much better product.